Alrighty guys, it is Qaaman here today, and I just wanted to temporarily use my old fake Qaaman voice before reverting back to my natural voice. And in today's video, we are going to discuss Toyotaro's recent interview where he talked about a variety of things in Dragon Ball Super. And if you guys want to check out this interview directly, I will post a link to it in the description, as I'm only going to talk about the most important talking points, as there's a variety of other things that he mentioned that I felt was rather boring and bland. So let's get the party started. Now, as to the title of this video, let's just get it out of the way. Why did Toyotaro make Frieza Black? It's very simple. He basically compared it to upgrading your credit card, where you would essentially go from a gold card to a black card, because the black card is the highest type of card that you can get, and he felt that he couldn't go the other way around, where you can go from a black card to a gold card, so he felt that black was the only color that he could choose for Frieza. He also said that it was rather fitting for Frieza too, considering the fact that black is associated as a dark, ominous color, so it was fitting for a character like Frieza. So if you guys thought that there was some deep explanation as to why Toyotaro made Frieza Black, you're not going to find it here. Now, the other interesting thing that Toyotaro mentioned in this interview is the fact that Frieza was always planned as a hidden character. Now, as you can see throughout the arc, and from what Toyotaro directly said, the hints were all there when you look at all of the main characters in the arc and the fact that they were all associated with Frieza. So if we begin with the two main villains of Gas and Elec, they're obviously a part of a gang that's connected to Frieza. And then when we look at the previous villain now turned hero, Granola, he's also connected to Frieza too, because he wants to get revenge against Frieza for essentially wiping out his entire race, very similar to the other two characters we can mention in Goku and Vegeta, who have long-running beef with Frieza, but also exist in the same universe as him and just kind of let him do what he wants. So as a result of having all of these loose ends, combined with the fact that this arc had multiple points where it pointed back to the past, seeing, you know, Bardock fighting against Gas, and then seeing Gine and Goku remembering his parents and all of that, there were a lot of different underlying storylines that were connected to Frieza, so it made sense for Frieza to come. And Toyotaro also directly mentions the fact that when you look at Frieza as an actual character, he had a problem with fitting him into the story, because of the fact that he had to draw a line between Frieza not being a part of the story at all, even though he needs Frieza to be a part of the story, or Frieza being too sudden. And he said he had to walk that fine line between finding that balance, essentially, which ultimately led to Frieza did coming in suddenly, but if you have to include him at some point, I mean, the best time was to just kill off the main characters of the arc, and essentially just set up another arc. Now, I could definitely understand why Dragon Ball fans would be upset about this, considering the fact that obviously you kind of feel like this arc was a waste of time, but considering the fact that there's no real character to Gas, and considering the fact that Granola is still alive, there's not really much that we really lost here. The only thing would be Elec, because I felt that there was a lot more interesting things that were going to be used with this character, but ultimately, let's just be honest, Dragon Ball fans aren't going to care about Elec for too long, so it's not really a big loss, ultimately. Now, we also have to mention Toyotaro talking about Trunks in his manga chapter in chapter 88. And he basically said that he always had ideas for Trunks to have his own spin-off manga, and he had to go through a bunch of different revisions before he actually got it done. Now, in saying this, Toyotaro is also indirectly taking a shot at Goten, because he's basically just saying that he wanted Trunks to be the main character, and briefly mentions Goten as just tagging along with him. Now, I find that this is completely hilarious, because it just further puts a bigger stamp as to how irrelevant Goten actually is, because when you look at his character, he's always associated with somebody else before you think of him as an individual. So when you think of Goten, you think of him being along with Trunks, or you think of him being a part of a fusion, or you think of him as Gohan's little brother, or you think about him as Goku's other son. You never think about Goten for who he is, and I just think that's completely hilarious that he never even was supposed to even have a serious role, because the shine was always supposed to go to Trunks. And Toyotaro also says that one of the reasons why he wanted to do a story about Trunks is because he really wanted to emphasize the difference between the present version of Trunks and essentially the future version of Trunks, who was a very different character, because the only people that he had in his life were basically Gohan and Bulma. And also the fact that he wanted to include romance in Dragon Ball, which I think is a very, very interesting difference because he mentions directly that romance is not what Dragon Ball is known for. So seeing the building romance between Trunks and Mai in the present timeline, combined with the fact that we also saw hints of their romance in the future timeline, is a very interesting dynamic between two different characters that are the exact same characters. Just the future timeline obviously just changed exactly who they are, and I think that that's going to make it very interesting there. Now, if we go on to some other things here too, Toyotaro also directly mentioned some things about the characters that he wanted to draw. Now, he said that he had interest in drawing normal human characters, as for the longest time he's basically just been drawing aliens, and also he's basically just been, you know, having Saiyan characters, so he wanted to do something different. And you can see, as he mentions directly, that he wanted to add more of an American influence to the Blue Hall High School, where, as you can see in the picture right here, you have multiple different looking characters, and you can even see that Mai is a high schooler in this drawing here, which obviously brings us into our next point, where Toyotaro talks about a variety of different things that we could look forward to seeing in the next arc. Now, this directly ties into Mai, because in the next chapter, Toyotaro directly says that we can expect Mai to be in high school, and we could see more of the romantic comedy that we got hints of in the previous chapter. And I think that this is going to be really interesting too, because, you know, obviously Trunks simped really hard for Mai in the last chapter, but if there is going to be a budding romance between them as characters, I think that's going to be a very interesting dynamic to continue off of the romance that we saw with future Trunks and future Mai through present characters, which I think is going to be interesting. And also to see how Mai's character is going to be written at an older age, but in her present time counterpart. So that's obviously some really interesting talking points there too. And also he mentions that we're going to learn more about Dr. Hito and how he connects into Dragon Ball Super Hero, because if you remember at the beginning of Dragon Ball Super Hero, Dr. Hito was coming out of prison, and considering the fact that he was already in prison in Dragon Ball Super Hero, you kind of have to wonder, well, what made him go to prison in the first place? And basically, this arc is going to tie all into this, which I think is very, very interesting, because this is very different from the Great Saiyan Man arc, where that arc was kind of just a placeholder for the upcoming tournament, whereas this arc, even though it feels like a filler arc, actually is going to tie into what will happen into Dragon Ball Super Hero in a more important way, mixed in with more humor and slice of life stuff. So I feel like this definitely makes it a lot more interesting. And he also mentions that we're going to learn more about the disc that, you know, Trunks retrieved from Dr. Hero, and how this obviously affects all of the plot. And I didn't mean to say Dr. Hero, I meant to say Dr. Hito, but Hito, all of that is so close. And then Super Hero, it's very easy to get a Freudian slip when using such similar sounding words, but you basically get the point here. That's what we should look forward to seeing in Dragon Ball Super Chapter 89, and I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Now, as a post-edit, I totally forgot to mention Krillin. We briefly got a chance to see him in Chapter 88 as an off-duty cop as he was communicating with Goten and Trunks, and if we get more of Krillin, seeing him do work in a very normal human-like way, that'd be really good for the plot too.